Hi, everyone. The Upper Room is designed to help us make the jump from being nice church attenders to being world-changing disciple makers. The theme and our goal for this Upper Room Growth Month here in February has been to produce fruit. The key verse for this month has been John 15:8, where Jesus says, "This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples." I want to congratulate Melody Moreno. She was the first person to memorize John 15, 1 through 11, which is just incredible. Several of you got the blessing of memorizing those red letters in the Bible, but Melody just so happened to be the first. So she gets the free lunch. Good job to you, Melody. I hope this month you have planted seeds of repentance and you've planted seeds of wisdom. And I pray that you would stick with those things that you've started so that they can begin to bear fruit in your life. The final challenge this month is to produce fruit on purpose. Or another way to put that is produce intentional fruit. We need to pursue our God-given priorities with intentionality. That's the key word. When you're intentional about something, you have a goal in mind or you have the purpose for it in mind. We're not just trying to produce fruit. We're trying to produce very specific kinds of fruit. This summer, I read a life-changing book called The Intentional Father by Jon Tyson. The book convicted me and it inspired me. Raising my kids to love Jesus and to have them ready to face the adult world is one of my greatest callings. But because life is so chaotic, I'd gotten into a rut where I was more of an accidental father than I was an intentional father. An intentional father has big goals and a specific plan on how you're actually going to reach those goals and how you're going to get there. The scary thing about parenting is that you're always on the clock. You only have so much time with these kids. And so being intentional helps you be good stewards of the little bit of time that you have. For me personally, and this is so important, time is our most precious resource. Every second that goes by, that resource diminishes. I don't have time to waste. And so I need to spend some time evaluating what my priorities are and then make a plan. This involves me asking some really important questions. Questions like, what do I have to make time for? What do I have to be able to say yes to? What are things or opportunities in my life that I need to say no to in order to focus on my priorities? This is going to be our homework today, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But before we do, I wanted to give you some examples in scriptures where we see God the Father, or we see Jesus being very intentional. I see God being very careful and working with purpose in mind when He made the earth. He creates the earth and everything in it in 6 very orderly days, and on the 7th day He ordains rest. Work has a purpose. You get to do that for 6 days. But rest is the purpose for the 7th day. This is how God designed the rhythm of our week. In Psalm 139, we see how carefully God made each of us. Listen to this. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, talking about our bodies and our souls. I know that full well. God made you on purpose. You are not an accident. You're not here by some whim. You're here because God wanted you, and He created you, and He placed you exactly where He wants you, in what generation He wanted you, so you could be a world changer for Him. God has great purposes for you. He's got great intentions for you. Last but not least, look at Luke 9:51. We call this verse the great turning point in the Gospels. We already talked about it a few months ago, but here it is. Luke writes, as the time approached for Him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. Another translation puts it like this. When the days drew near for Him to be taken up, He set His face to go to Jerusalem. Jesus wasn't just walking randomly through the Holy Land, doing ministry, letting the wind blow him wherever it wanted to. He had a higher goal. He always had a mission on his mind. His cross was ever before him, waiting for him in Jerusalem. He didn't quit halfway in. You don't see him wandering off the path that the Father had laid out for him. He didn't take rabbit trails, and I'm sure thousands of them were calling to him, and some of them might have even looked promising. But he kept his eyes on the prize. I'm hoping that you would look at this moment in your life as one of the great turning points in your story. My hope and dream is that you would select a few priorities and then be intentional in your pursuit of those priorities. If you're married, you must be an intentional lover of your spouse. If you're a parent, you must be intentional in what you're trying to accomplish with your kids. And we're all called to make disciples, which is why you're here. And so we must make room for disciple making to play an important role in our lives as well. Pastor Rowley, our worship pastor, has been spending a lot of time thinking and meditating on this word, intentionality. And so I have invited him to take my place on the screen and share a few thoughts with you.
Hey everybody. So every year as a staff, we spend time individually praying for a word for the year, sort of like a theme, something that we can draw back at and look back at as we progress through the year. And as I spent time at the end of 2022 praying, I felt really quickly that the word that God gave to me was the word intentional or intentionality. And so at first when I heard that word, I'm like, oh, perfect. I know exactly what this means. And at first I thought really it just meant being intentional with my time, the time that I spend at work, the time that I spend at home with my wife or with my kids. And so I thought, great, this is going to be a piece of cake. But as I spent more time praying about it and asking God for clarity, I realized that what he really meant was he wanted me to be intentional with my time, but also with everything, with every conversation that I have with one of my neighbors or my friends, every meeting that I have, being very intentional about the things that I say, every prayer that I make from stage, being intentional about the words that I say. And in the context of discipleship, I really felt like he was saying, be intentional about being a disciple who makes disciples, about being in the Word, about growing in my relationship with him. And so for me, intentionality is something that I'm going to be focusing on this year. And that's my word for the year.
I appreciate Rowley sharing his thoughts on intentionality. Intention is an orientation. It's like setting your life on a compass point and keeping it there. It's a way of doing life. Rowley talked about being intentional in all of his interactions, making the most of every opportunity, and being mindful that every conversation can become an opportunity. That's huge, and we need to do the same. And if you need a way to describe it, you can say that's what it means to be salty. Everywhere we go, we bring Jesus with us and we bring his kingdom with us. Intentionality also requires identifying priorities, setting goals, and then determining the steps you need to take to achieve those goals. That's our homework for this week. And so I'm going to give you 6 things I want you to do. So get your journals out and prepare to write. Number 1, make a list of your highest priorities. Try to keep that limited, pretty small, like around 4 would be plenty for now. Remember, becoming a disciple who makes disciples needs to be on the list. That's number 1. Number 2, ask yourself this question. Where do you want to be 1 year from now in all of those areas, those priorities that you just wrote down? Where do you want to be with them 1 year from now? What fruit do you want to see as you pursue those? Number 3, what do you need to do intentionally, day by day, to reach those goals? What are you going to have to do? What's the path you're going to have to walk? Number 4, you're going to zoom out and take a little bigger look. How about 5 years from now? Is there something as you think about where you want to be 5 years now? Is there a course correction that you need to make so that you land where you're wanting to land 5 years from now? The next one is, what needs to go in order to make room for these priorities. There's so many good things we can do. What's the most important things that we have to do well? What needs to go? Do you need to get out a bulldozer and create some space, or do you just need to say no to a couple of things? Lastly, what needs to be added to your life to reach your goals? When I put this up on the app and when I send the email today, I'll make sure I have those 6 pieces of homework written out for you. Now, I would love to hear what your experience has been like this month, and I'd really love to hear, once you do some of this work, what are your 4 or 5 priorities that you're focusing on, and what do you think are the keys for you to becoming successful in those areas? If you wanted to drop me an email, mattl@journeykingman.com, I'd love to take a gander at what you're doing. But as I said in previous videos, we're going to get out of this what we put in. And so I'll be praying for you that you hold your life up and then you let God set the order of how he wants you to live. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.